Welcome to the Sound of Resistance channel. As the Ukraine-Russian war continues in its 9th month, a research institution in UK has exposed a secret Russian military unit. It was reported that this team, consisting of more than 30 young engineers, took part in the stages of determining the target of the missiles. The unit, under the command of Lieutenant Colonel Igor Bagniuk, is blamed for the deaths of at least 70 civilians and the destruction of the energy infrastructure in Ukraine. A secret Russian military unit, mostly young engineers and IT experts, is behind the deadly missile strikes in Ukraine, according to a new report from British research agency Bellingcat. Bellingcat wrote that at least 33 military engineers work at the little-known main computing center of the Russian General Staff Ministry. These engineers are responsible for sea, air, and land-launched cruise missiles and are based in Moscow and St. Petersburg. It was reported that he was divided into three teams of 10 working from secure command centers in St. Petersburg. Some had previous military service as Navy captains or ship engineers, the report said. Others had previous civilian work experience as corporate IT professionals or game designers. Now we are presenting another Russian secret that created an event on the world agenda. Documents found in Ukraine reveal the panic and chaos of Russian soldiers fleeing the attacks. According to documents discarded in Ukraine, Vladimir Putin's forces were left in disarray after being battered by Hymars attacks. The Russian army is collapsing. Russian invaders are fleeing in panic and chaos on Ukrainian territory. Documents abandoned by Russian troops gave a clear insight into the panic that gripped them as Volodymyr Zelensky's forces made dramatic advances in the east of the country. The evidence emerged after Russian soldiers were forced to hastily retreat from their former headquarters in the town of Balaklia, 90 kilometers south of Kharkov, after being under heavy bombardment by US-supplied Hymars rocket launchers. After the Russian invaders left, Ukrainian troops found a large number of valuable documents, Russian documents, some scattered on the ground, others stuffed in a furnace. A handwritten notebook contained details of information including coordinates of Russian intelligence units, records of calls from commanders, details of battles, men killed and equipment destroyed, and accounts of deterioration in morale and discipline. In total, thousands of documents were seized that paint a grim picture of the events leading up to Russia's withdrawal from the northeastern Ukraine. The captured Russian documents reveal that they were engaged in combating surveillance and electronic warfare using ready-made drones flown by barely trained Russian soldiers. Equipment used by the Russians to disrupt Ukrainian communications was often out of order. The documents also reveal the growing effectiveness of Ukrainian forces and provide clues as to how the 8-month war could evolve, with Russia currently under intense pressure on the southern front on the Black Sea coast. In the weeks leading up to their withdrawal, Russian forces around Balaklia were shattered by missiles from Ukrainian Hymars artillery, targeting their command center. A Russian officer who had served in the Balaklia force for 3 months, who asked to be identified with the military call sign Plakat Junior 888, said that a friend of his died of blood loss following a Ukrainian Hymars attack in early September. Documents in the bunker indicated Colonel Ivan Popov as the commander of the Russian military force departing from Balaklia, along with many of his senior officers who served in Russia's war against separatists in Chechnya and the 2008 invasion of former Soviet Georgia. Popov served in the Russian Navy's 11th Corps, part of the Baltic Fleet. The Balaklia force also included a commander responsible for keeping the local civilian population in check. This commander made headlines in the newspapers under the clear nickname Commander 5th Granite. Also seized Russian documents revealed a Russian interrogation center where civilians were beaten and interrogated with electric shocks, according to 6 former detainees and Ukrainian officials. In his interrogation center, the Russian forces carried out very inhuman tortures against the Ukrainians. Staff lists showed soldiers from the Russian-controlled Luhansk region of Ukraine fighting alongside men from Russia's 11th Corps. Russian soldiers scribbled on the walls of this base and hung flyers warning that if they retreated, Ukraine would fall under Nazi rule. The invaders also brought with them old maps of Soviet Ukraine. On July 19, 4 months after capturing the area, the Russian invaders faced their first serious challenge from the Ukrainian armed forces. Documents show that a column of Ukrainian soldiers attacked the Russian front, supported by tanks and under an artillery barrage at the village of Rakove at the northwest end of the area held by Balaklia's forces. By 3 p.m., an unnamed Russian soldier on the front line had radioed his commanders in Balaklia to tell them that his position had been captured and that he had to withdraw. These Russian soldiers demanded artillery strikes to destroy the mission he abandoned, after which all communication was cut off. In the hours that followed, although Russian commanders sent reinforcements and mobilized attack helicopters, they were unsuccessful. The Russian army lost 1 tank, 2 armored personnel carriers, and 7 soldiers during the conflict. As a result of this conflict, 39 Russian soldiers were injured and 17 Russian soldiers are missing. On July 24, the author of the handwritten notebook recorded that a HIMARS attack killed 12 Russian soldiers belonging to the 336th Naval Brigade of the Baltic Fleet. The war further eroded morale and discipline among the soldiers. According to his father Alexei and Plakat Jr. 888, who served in the Balaklia force, Artyom Shtanko commanded a detachment that suffered losses, and the Battle of Rakove was intense. Alexei stated that Shtanko refused the order of the company commander to send his men to the artillery fire. The unidentified author of the notebook states that 24 and 25 days after the Battle of Rakove, he was held at his base in Balaklia by someone facing disciplinary action for pushing back his platoon by Shtanko. The notebook also recorded the desertion of Roman Elistratov, a corporal of the 9th Motorized Rifle Regiment, who felt the full force of the Ukrainian offensive. Plakat Jr. 888 also explained that it was trying to fight the successive Ukrainian attacks without adequate supplies throughout August. A little calendar he keeps in the trenches during his quarterly rotation paints a grim picture. August 27 is simply marked as the worst day. He says this was when their location came under heavy artillery attack and one of his friends died in his arms. Between 6 and 8 September, precision attacks were carried out on the command center in Balaklia, and Volodymyr Livochokin, a local man who previously ran the area, says the entire facility was in flames. In a video posted on social media on September 10, Ukrainian soldiers filmed the destroyed hangar where Russian forces hold their vehicles with the Ukrainian voice-over. This is what the result of HIMARS works look like. 2 other residents describe seeing Russian soldiers throwing their weapons and abandoning their vehicles as they fled. When we look at all these records and the situation of the Russian army at the front, it becomes clear how deplorable the situation is for Russia. The fact that what happened is ignored by Putin does not mean that everything can be done to win this war. On the other hand, when it comes to Putin, this possibility of him being in a position to do all kinds of crazy and escalating things, war with the anxiety of losing continues. The commander of the Ukrainian ground forces warned that Russian President Vladimir Putin's threat to use nuclear weapons in Ukraine is real and that the West should be worried. But he also underlined that his country is still winning the war. General Colonel Alexander Syrsky played a decisive role in turning the war in Ukraine's favor, first leading the successful defense of the capital, Kiev, and then leading the war with a spectacular counterattack that overturned the months-long conflict in the northeast and put the Russian forces on the defensive. Syrsky spoke at length publicly, describing Ukraine's tactics, the importance of Western support, the renewed threat of aggression from Belarus, and Ukraine's determination to do so. He even stated that they would take back all their lands, including the Crimean Peninsula, which Moscow had annexed. But Ukraine's success continued to bring to light the facts that Putin may resort to nuclear weapons to reverse the tide of Russia's war in Ukraine. If you want to follow the hot developments closely, do not forget to subscribe to our channel.